Wisteria, energy, twister.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are continuing haunting places of Yorkshire. We're still in Beverley because there seems to be a lot in Beverley, West Yorkshire. The Cloisters restaurant on Tiger Lane, built in 1730, stands amid a row of shops, though it was formerly a larger tavern. The Tiger Inn until the 1840s, when business as a coaching inn dwindled, and the building was subsequently sold and used for other purposes. During the summer of 1982, a joiner was doing repair work on the staircase between the ground and first floors, and on one occasion his young apprentice looked up at the top of the staircase and saw the head and shoulders of a boy with fair hair and a scarf around his neck, but he was invisible below the waist. During the period that the restaurant was a wine bar with the name Upstairs, Downstairs, the resident spooks seemed to have a particular like, or dislike, for tradesmen such as joiners and bricklayers, its favourite trick being to tap them on the shoulders, upon which they would spin round to find no one there. In the late 1970s, the building used to be a motor spare shop for Armstrong's Garage, just across the road. Many of the customers felt uneasy about entering the premises. Particularly one man refused to go anywhere near it and sent colleagues to get parts for him, for he did not like the eerie atmosphere that he felt pervaded the ground floor. There have been several occasions when the owners of today's restaurant have heard the eerie sounds of something or someone being dragged across the first floor. The ghost may be a former resident of the Tiger Inn, though many of the interior furnishings of the Cloisters were salvaged from an old church in Hull. So it's possible that these days a vaporous vicar is flitting about the premises instead. Definitely possible. Now we're going to head over to Bridlington. In 1998, a private house in Besingby Road was reported in a local newspaper to have been haunted by a Victorian gentleman ever since the family moved there 10 years before. The ghost has been witnessed not only by the family, but also by any friends visiting and the neighbours. An old photographic plate was found in the attic, left there by the previous owner. This matched the description of the ghost. It was discovered to be the picture of one Harold Hill, a former occupant of the property. The family reported that they felt it was a comfort to have the ghost, because Mr. Hill only appeared when there was trouble or when they were stressed or in a panic about something. It was as if he appeared in order to calm things down and to assure them that everything would be all right. The range of phenomena over the years included a mysterious whirlwind, which sent towels flying off the rails in the bathroom, and often the strong smell of tobacco throughout the house. However, one incident persuaded the family to call in an exorcist when the pipe-smoking Mr. Hill materialised in the guest bedroom one night and started to serenade a startled visitor. A former Bridlington vicar, the Reverend Tom Willis, an official exorcist. He blessed every room in the house, and yet the ghostly Mr. Hill was said to continue in his capacity as a non-paying tenant. Funny. Now we're heading over to Driffield. Never heard of Driffield. Should have. I am in Yorkshire, but I haven't. So yeah, let's go to Driffield. Successive tenants report of frightening happenings in a flat in Mill Street for several years. The most terrifying occurrences was the gas ring on the cooker turning itself on at night and pumping out lethal fumes. People simply forgetting to turn off appliances may of course explain this, But the experience of the tenant in November 1995, Tracy Matheson, were backed up by her predecessor, Beverly Tulloch, who reported exactly the same thing. The Reverend Tom Willis said that the occurrences sounded like the work of a poltergeist, and if that were the case, then a prayer or blessing would probably cease the disturbances. However, he also pointed out that if it's an evil spirit that was at work here, then an exorcism might be necessary to bring peace to the flat. With no follow-up report in the local papers, we can only assume that something more than a simple prayer was needed, and all apparently has returned to normal. But who knows? Now we're going to head over to Hull. In January 1998, a pantomime star had a spooky experience in the basement of Hull's new theatre. Emma Morris, who played the title role in the theatre's production of Dick Whittington, saw the figure dressed in a black cape and a black top hat as she walked down a narrow corridor and up a staircase, just seconds before she was due to make her entry on stage. She noticed that the air around her went freezing cold as the phantom brushed past. Nicknamed Charlie, actually, by staff members, the ghost, or perhaps there is more than one, who knows, has appeared in many different guises, including a grey hood of misty shape. The theories to account for the haunting range from a man who was stabbed in a fight in the 1840s to someone who fell into the walls of the assembly rooms when they were being bricked up in the 19th century. Sightings have been reported since the early part of the 20th century, the earliest modern report being from 1943, when theatre worker Eve Rainforth saw a figure in a dark grey riding coat with long hair curling up at the ends. Alison Duncan, a spokesperson for the theatre, said that she'd not seen anything herself, but admitted that there had been numerous witnesses over the years. She explained that, for many people, Charlie was part of the theatre, part of the features and the fittings, but he remained a mystery to anyone who had yet to encounter him. Dana, who appeared in the theatre's production of Snow White in 1982, often heard knocks on her dressing room door while in the company of wardrobe mistresses, even though there was no one in the vicinity to account for them. She had also been followed by the sound of footsteps during her time at the theatre. House managers and cleaners have had just as many meetings with the spirit, including a cleaner, Jackie Gower, who saw Charlie pulling himself a pint in the bar. Possibly the most spectacular experience was that of the city councillor, Anne Stanley, and her husband John, who both suddenly felt icy cold while sitting on their box during a military band concert. Although her husband saw nothing, Mrs. Stanley watched in amazement as a caped figure emerged out of a grey mist and then floated through the air, hovering 4 feet above people sitting in the stalls. Mr. Michael Lister, the current manager of the theatre, says, "I have experienced Charlie on several occasions, twice in my office. The first occasion was before we had computers. I passed the door of my office and heard the sound of sort of an electronic typewriter. I thought this was strange, as my assistant Sylvia was not due to work for some time. On returning to my office several seconds later, the door was locked, as I had left it, with no sign of anyone. Some years later, after the computers had been installed, I passed the office door again and heard the sound of typing and the sound of a bunch of keys jiggling and then dropping onto the desk. When I opened the locked door, there was no sign of Sylvia. But there was a message on the computer screen which read, 'You have typed an invalid operation,' which if you press certain keys, it's going to automatically say that on a computer. It's just something that happens. We're still in Hull. So in 1969, The Hull Daily Mail reported how a family living in a house in Argyle Terrace, now demolished, although Argyle Street it still exists, the house itself's been demolished, become the focus of attention for the spirit of a former occupant of the house. Mr. and Mrs. Windley and their 4 children experienced sudden cold spots, strange noises such as bangs and crashes from empty rooms, being touched from behind by unseen hands. Numerous neighbours encountered the same things on their regular visits, and one girl saw what she described as the ghost of a very old lady dressed in a shawl and with long fingernails. The description matched that of a former owner, and Mrs. Sellers referred to in an anonymous letter sent to the family by a lady who had been the cleaner. The correspondent wrote that she had worked for Mrs. Sellers more than 50 years previously, and, having read a newspaper account of the family's troubles, recognised the description given by the young girl. "Reading about your ghost has brought back memories to me," she wrote, "as I used to work at your house for a lady who was over 80 years old. I am well over 60 myself now, and was then a girl of 14. I used to clean up at your address. The old lady, Mrs. Sellers, wore a shawl. She was very tall and slim. She had no family, and her husband died soon after they were married. She was a very religious person." So yeah, that's an actual house haunting, but the house itself has now been destroyed. Thank you for listening. When we come back, we'll head somewhere different, and the next one may actually be the last in the series. Thank you for listening. Please remember to hit the like, share if you can, and do consider subscribing because it does really help, and it's free. Many blessings.
Wisteria. Energy. Twister.